One of the most important things that medical science has done over the past couple of, centuries actually, is come up with vaccines against some of the most devastating infectious diseases we have.
We are very fortunate to have vaccines in our toolbox. Having 14 vaccine preventable diseases that we can protect our children from is something I think we should be very proud of.
So I do think that it is, a life journey to plan for, to understand why do we have these different vaccines available. And to me, I just think it's important for when we think about prevention and health in general.
That's why vaccinations are so important, from infancy all the way through adulthood, helping Missourians live long, happy, healthy lives. I'm Nicole Cope, the Executive Director of the Missouri Immunization Coalition. To better understand vaccines, let's start with the science and listen to our panel of experts explain the historical background of vaccinations.
It's difficult to think of what it must have been like before there were vaccines. I am 66 years old, and I am lucky enough to have been born in an era where a lot of vaccines came along. But I do have friends who are just a few years older than me who ended up having polio when they were very young children. And they have ended up with crutches and leg braces for their entire lives. This is the sort of thing that used to devastate communities. When polio would break out, social life would shut down. Kids couldn't go to the park, go to the pool, go to the movie theaters. Everything was shut down for the entire summer. I mean, it's this sort of thing that we're only just now experiencing with COVID-19. And so, but this was something that would happen every summer in communities.
When I'm counseling patients, I'm family medicine trained, so I take care of, babies all the way up to older adults later in life. So for me, it's important at the course of your lifespan that there's different vaccines for different stages of life to help, with the primary prevention of some daily disease. So for me, on the science side, it's really interesting how, a vaccine, one shot can actually prevent a really severe disease, and your body can learn how to create or make an antibody to protect you from it. Like it's pretty amazing how vaccines work, but I understand the hesitation for some people, but I think it's pretty amazing how it works.
Yeah, I think that this year especially has been such an amazing experience of what science looks like in vaccines and vaccine administration and vaccine development. But I think in general, where it started is quite the story, and where it's led to until today is pretty amazing.
The thing is that our bodies are negotiating with microorganisms all the time, with viruses and bacteria and funguses. And for the most part, these things are either harmless or helpful. But when things like measles, mumps, chickenpox, pertussis, polio come along, those are the things that can kill us. And those are the things that we have been able to conquer with vaccines, and that if people keep getting vaccinated, we will be able to conquer, for the rest of eternity.
It's a fact. Vaccinations keep us healthy, starting at infancy, through childhood, into your teenage years, all the way through adulthood.
Right. Well, I'm a pediatrician, and so I see a lot of babies and a lot of kids. And we, the infant vaccine series starts right at birth with the Hepatitis B vaccine, and that's important. It's important that kids get that vaccine, because if hepatitis B is transmitted from mother to baby during the birth process, hepatitis B, which is always a bad disease, can be so bad in a newborn baby that it can cause cancer, and it can cause liver failure to an extent that a child might end up needing a liver transplant. After that, we give vaccines at 2 months, 4 months, and 6 months against things like pertussis or whooping cough, diphtheria, tetanus, polio, and 2 types of bacteria that can cause meningitis. One is called Haemophilus, and the other is called Meningococcus. And these things are just really bad. Before we had vaccines, particularly against Haemophilus and pneumococcus, I've been a pediatrician for 40 years, and every winter in particular, kids would come into our hospital with these infections and end up with a brain infection. Some of those kids died of it, and some of those kids who lived ended up with lifelong disabilities, hearing loss, intellectual disabilities, cerebral palsy. we now have vaccines to prevent them. And the thing is that kids have to get these vaccines at 2 months, 4 months, and 6 months in order for their bodies to build up full immunity against these diseases. And if they miss them, then they still have a chance of ending up getting one of these infections and ending up with a lifelong disability or perhaps dying of it.
And as a new mom, that can be devastating. So for me, when I think about the importance of the hepatitis B vaccine, even at the start of life, we're protecting your newborn, we're protecting our babies from something that can be deadly.
It's just important for babies to get that first vaccine. It helps with the vaccine schedule, as well as it protects them against a serious disease that we don't know we have sometimes and can be more complicated, have more complications in the end if they do not get that initially.
And once we implemented universal vaccination for our newborns, we significantly decreased the number of cases that we saw with hepatitis B. And just overall, we improved the outcome for the babies.
Yeah, the baby can have some passive immunity from the mom, but that is not long lasting. It only lasts for a certain time in their life. And then they need their own native immunity to step in, and that's why the vaccines are helpful. It's going to protect them until the vaccines are working completely.
Right. Well, in the adolescent years, once we get to about age 11, generally we give vaccines against a booster against tetanus and pertussis, which again, people should get every 10 years the rest of their lives. But here we start protecting against two other really significant microorganisms. One is called HPV, or human papillomavirus, and that's a virus that can cause cancer. And what's remarkable about this vaccine is that it actually protects against cancer and prevents cancer. In women, HPV can cause cervical cancer. In men, it can cause cancer of the lower GI tract and the genital tract. In both men and women, it can cause throat cancer. In fact, Michael Douglas, he underwent, really intense therapy for his throat cancer, and that was caused by HPV. So this cancer can show up anywhere in the body because of that virus. And this vaccine, the current vaccine, protects against 13 different versions of it, or 13 serotypes of it. So that covers probably about 90% of the possible infections you can get from it. And the rates of cervical cancer in particular have really fallen dramatically since the institution, and the administration of HPV vaccine. So that's given at age 11, and it's 2 doses. After the first dose, the second one has to be spaced at least 6 months later. But if for some reason you come in a year later with your kid, you can still get them vaccinated. The body remembers, and you just pick up where you left off. Yeah, the other important vaccine that we give at age 11 that's new is a vaccine against what's called meningococcus. Now, meningococcus, as the name implies, causes meningitis, just like those other ones I mentioned earlier, Haemophilus and pneumococcus. But meningococcus, for reasons we don't quite understand, seems to be most severe and most likely to cause meningitis and severe disease in people in the late teens and early 20s. That's why we want to start getting them vaccinated around age 11 to get their body ready for it. And then when they turn 16, they'll get a booster of that, plus another vaccine against a different form of meningococcus called Meningococcus B. And that should give kids and adolescents and young adults the best protection we can give against this very, very, very serious disease.
There are vaccinations that we can plan for, and others that when we least expect it, like the flu vaccination and the COVID-19 vaccination.
Yes, so seasonal influenza, the flu. I think with COVID on the scene, I'm really able to talk about, that we see the impacts of one respiratory disease and flu. Some people, they don't think that flu can kill you. And all throughout my training, even when I worked at the children's hospital, when I worked at the adult medicine hospital, in those cooler months, winter months, I always saw somebody admitted for influenza, really, really sick, could end up in the ICU. And I think people in the community don't see that part of the flu virus, or some people just believe, oh, it's the common cold. And it's not. I mean, it can be deadly. It can be devastating. You can have lingering effects. And so for me, when I counsel, I talk about the flu virus, the flu vaccine starting, at 6 months, and all the way through someone's lifetime, that's one vaccine that's really, really important. And we do have to get our vaccine every season, the influenza vaccine seasonally, because the virus changed, the strains changed. We don't want another H1N1 outbreak or another, influenza outbreak from this. So for me, that's another one too that's pretty important to discuss during the lifetime of someone's life journey.
So every year it's like putting a little bit of money in a bank account and it builds up. It's like a savings account. It builds up and you keep some halo protection year after year against strains of flu that might not be here this year, but will be there in a year or two.
And that the COVID-19 vaccine is really an exciting vaccine. I mean, it's kind of the newest edge scientific stuff that we can do, and that it's so specific, and that we've seen such efficacy from the vaccine that it's like the best starting out one, as well as the fact that it's been tested on so many different people, much more than we typically get out of a vaccine study, initially, that it's just been shown to be so safe. So I always reassure them that it's a safe vaccine and that it's going to be important for us to be able to get through these times and start to see our families without worrying about giving each other COVID-19.
Our medical community embraces vaccinations, and they encourage you to embrace them as well.
As pediatricians, it's our jobs to try to help them understand why vaccines are important, and think that makes a huge difference. And I think that's important for us to remember.
One thing that I would say, if you don't complete the vaccine series, it's not just you as an individual that could potentially be affected, but even those around you, our community. That's how we were able to get rid of so many of these diseases that were killing people. The idea behind herd immunity. So if somebody don't fully complete their vaccination series, it's not just, you as an individual or, the mom or somebody making that decision, but it's also affecting the community. And so one decision can have a ripple effect for the entire community that you live in, if we don't provide the herd immunity and also protect yourself. So I think that it's important to complete the entire vaccination series, no matter which one you start, to protect you as an individual, your family, your friends, and the community, so that these diseases that were killing people will not come back and flare up again in our communities.
Oh, yeah, exactly. This is something that we as a pediatrician, I'm most focused on vaccines for kids. But as a guy who's 66 years old, I'm also focused on vaccines for myself as I get older. We all are going to be facing threats of infection that could be life-threatening our entire lives. And the people at the CDC and the National Institutes of Health and various places, for my profession, the American Academy of Pediatrics, have done remarkable work at figuring out what vaccines people need at what stage of their lives, what are the reasons you should get them, what's the best spacing for them, to make these diseases so uncommon that it might seem reasonable to question whether you need a vaccine. The point is, we all do. I need my vaccines. The kids who come to my office need their vaccines. You need your vaccines to protect yourself and those you love.
We should all feel comfortable talking to our doctors and getting the facts about vaccines. If you are behind on recommended vaccinations due to missed appointments with your doctor, don't wait. Vaccinate. It's time to catch up. I'm Nicole Cope, the Executive Director of the Missouri Immunization Coalition. Thanks for watching. Take care.